Hello there, you're welcome to HisGov TV. My name is Collins Nanaya Avebrese. Now, in this video, we are going to look at the fall of General Akuffo, General Fred Akuffo. And this video is a popular request made by one of our subscribers. And so if you have any of such requests to make, if you have any subject that you may want us to discuss, you can share with us in the comment section, and then we'll be glad to do that for you. So I'm expecting the person, I've forgotten the name, but I'm expecting him to be the first person to actually reply to comment on this video. Now we are looking at the fall of Fred Akuffo, and we know that Fred Akuffo was the one who came to replace Ignatius Kutu Echampong. And in case you've not watched the video on Echampong's fall, you can also search through the playlist, or I may include a link in the description for you to look at. So Akuffo came into the scene after Echampong was asked to resign. He was actually forced to resign from the SMC I, and that's the Supreme Military Council I. And so that paved the way for General Akuffo, or Fred Akuffo, to be the leader. And don't forget that Echampong and the SMC I had been accused of many corrupt practices, and therefore the image of the military was at stake, and therefore there was the need for Akuffo to restore that lost image of the military. And so he forced Echampong to of course resign. So Fred Akuffo then restructured the SMC I and called it the SMC II. So that's the Supreme Military Council II. So making Akuffo the leader of the Supreme Military Council II. So he was sworn in as the leader of the Supreme Military Council II on July 6th, 1978 by Chief Justice S.K. Apalu. So he was the one who sworn Akuffo in. Now, Echampong was accused of running a one-man show because he was not taking the advice of the other, SMC members. Now, bear in mind that the SMC II was quite different. You know, the members of the SMC II were mainly civilians, and so, for instance, Akuffo tried to do away with all the military who were serving in the ministries or the regions. And so, for instance, when you look at somebody like Colonel R.J. Feli, who was then the Commissioner of Foreign Affairs, I think his position was taken over by Miss Gloria Ninkwa and many others. Many of the positions were taken over by civilians. The chairman of the the chief executive of the Cocoa Board, many other government appointees were all changed from the military to a civilian people. And so, one also problem was that Echampong was not willing to return the country to a civilian rule, and so that was even partly a reason why he was overthrown. And if you have watched that video, you saw in his introduction of the UNIGOV where he sought to unite both the civilians and the military. So the mood in the country at that time was that almost everybody was looking forward for an election to take place. Okay, and so when Akuffo took over, people were expecting him to actually return the country to a civilian rule, which he did. So in July 31st, 1978, the SMC II, led by Fred Akuffo, proposed to return Ghana to a civilian rule with a transitional interim national government, and that is what Akuffo intended to do. However, he felt that the transitional national government should rule for a period of 4 years before the country would be finally, of course, have an election, and then we will get back to the Third Republic, I guess. But that is not, of course, that did not sit well with the, with the masses. For example, there were fierce protests by, of course, UTAC as well as NUCs, and they were demanding, these organizations, which are still there today, were actually demanding that the country should be returned to civilian rule by 1st July 1979. So almost just some few months. And they were demanding for, a universal adult suffrage. They were no more interested in waiting for 4 years before the country would be returned to civilian rule. So they were demanding for a complete, of course, do away with this whole military. I guess the people were fed up with the military. And so they demanded and put a lot of pressure on Fred Akuffo to allow a universal election by universal adult suffrage by July 1st for 1979. So because of the immense pressure mounted by these organizations, in October there was an announcement by Fred Akuffo, and for the first time in 20 years, almost 20 years, December 13, 1978, the political party decree was passed, which prohibited the formation of any political party. When the champion overthrew Abuzia, there was this decree whereby all political parties were banned. No one could form any political party. And so the first thing that you must do, if you want to return the country to a civilian rule, is by bringing out a new decree which will now allow people to form political parties. However, Fred Akuffo banned all other political parties, the old ones, especially the CPP. Of course, the CPP had been banned, we know, by Ankara, the National Liberation Council, so they were already banned. But the new ones, of course, which had even been formed, of course, the UP, the Buzia's party, now Wedema or so, and then also the NPP, the Northern People's Party, were all banned. These were old political parties, and all of them were actually banned from taking part in that election, which then means that a new election was political parties were supposed to be formed in 1979 to contest for that election. All right, and so that is how Fred Akuffo came to the scene. He didn't rule for long. I don't even think he even ruled for more than a year. It was less than a year. So Akuffo went on the radio in 1979 to declare his intention, and that he said that the government of the Supreme Military Council will not in any way be involved in the organization of any political party, nor shall we interfere in any way with the political campaign. So he made it clear to the people that the military was no more going to be involved in politics. And of course, the military has no role, in politics. It's just that because of colonial rule and the effect, we find military being involved in political affairs in Africa. This is not said of if you go to the West, So he made it clear that the military was no more interested, and that the military was not going to form any political party and so ever, or even interfere in the campaign processes. I think that he said it basically because, the military, at Champon's time, a lot of things had happened. People in Ghana, for instance, or even in general, people feel that the military is disciplined and all of that. But what happened during the Champon's regime, people felt that that image, that disciplined image of the military was no more. And so I believe that even if now, if there was supposed to be a military government formed, I'm not sure people would even vote for that government. So, but of course, clearly, that is what Fred Akuffo, came to do. So there was an election held, and that ushered the country into the Third Republic, which was won by the People's National Party, led by Dr. Hillel Liman. And I have also done a video on the fall of Dr. Hillel Liman, why he was overthrown by General Rawlings in 1981, 2 years when he became the president. So now let's look at the reasons why Akuffo, or Fred Akuffo, or General Fred Akuffo was, should I say overthrown, because he wasn't overthrown, but he was killed by Rawlings. After the election, the 1979 election, which brought into office Dr. Hillel Liman, Rawlings and some other junior officers, decided they didn't even wait for the election to take place. Actually, that is what happened. Of course, Rawlings and his men did not even wait for the election to take place. They overthrew the SMC II on June 4th, 1979. So the election did not even take place, and Rawlings came to overthrow the SMC II, and that led to the killing of the many people that you heard that, of course, Rawlings ordered to be killed. So Akuffo, of course, himself was killed. Champon was also killed, and many other members of the SMC I. So let's look at the reasons why this happened. Why would Rawlings? Because as if you listen to the narration I've given you, you know that Akuffo was not in any way trying to perpetuate himself as a president, and indeed he had said that the military was no more going to be involved in any politics. So then what, of course, went wrong? Why did Rawlings come to overthrow the SMC II, which was led by Fred Akuffo? Why didn't he wait for the election to take place? Because it was just months to the election, and that happened. So let's look at some of the reasons that led to Rawlings overthrowing the SMC II, led by Akuffo. Now, the first of them was the rise in inflation. Inflation has been part of this country from time immemorial, and just quite recently we saw what inflation can do to your pocket or to the citizens. Now, remember, during Akuffo's time, there was a devaluation of the cedi, by I think 58% or so, and so that is what brought about the inflation in the country. And so, most of the items that were imported, of course, that were used by the people, were imported from abroad. So once you devalue your currency, what happens is that those imports that you bring into your country becomes very, very expensive. Okay. Now the idea of inflation is to, the idea of for devaluation is to decrease, import, and then you are thinking that it will increase, export, of course, so that a lot of money would come, or foreign exchange will come into the system. And that is the reason why most of these governments tries to devalue the value of their currencies, because they want to limit importation and then increase exportation of, their raw material, so that a lot of money will come into the system. But very often that is the theoretical aspect of devaluation. In the context of Africa, or even in Ghana, it does not work. I think Busia did the same thing. It does not work because we are not producing. We are not producing any consumer goods. All our consumer goods are imported. And so if you want to halt importation, or you want to decrease importation, it means that these consumer goods are going to be scarce on the market. Those who have the little money to go and purchase them abroad would come with, they will sell it at a very exorbitant prices. So that was the situation, and that was the reason why consumer goods, the prices in consumer goods doubled and even quadrupled in some cases, as it happened just almost a year, and we are still in it. We are still feeling it. We are still, of course, feeling the hardship. So that was, of course, one reason that led to the anger among people, especially the workers who were not in support because of that. And I'm sure today, I know a lot of workers are not in support of the NPP or the New Patriotic Party because of inflation, and they have, of course, constantly been talking about it. Even during the recent, I think May Day, they made some comment, but things have changed. So you have to use the democratic way to say, of course, to bring out our views. Good. Now, the next of the reasons, of course, that led to the fall of Fred Akuffo and the SMC II was the number of strikes that also happened in the country. I've already mentioned inflation, and when there is inflation in the system, what happens is that workers are not comfortable, and therefore that leads to a lot of strikes. And you recall that I think Conagrat last year or so went on strike, demanding for like 50% increment of their salary, because they claimed that inflation had eroded all their salaries. And that's what happens when there is inflation. This is what happens. A lot of strikes. So Fred Akuffo's time, there was a lot of strikes between August and November 1978. For the country recorded 8 strikes, and over 70,000 workers, involving over 70,000 workers. Now, the most serious of all these strikes was from the postal services, the electricity corporation, and as well as GEHOC. And I mean, the reason was quite simple. They wanted to secure a pay rise, to meet the cost of living, which, of course, had rose sharply as a result of the August 1978 devaluation of the cedi against the dollar. And so strikes are a very potent way of registering our displeasure. And so when there is strikes, or the government is not in a sound mind, it becomes very, very, very disturbed. Now, the next of the reason why Fred Akuffo was also overthrown by the AFRC, led by Rawlings, was the enactment of the emergency decree in 1978. Military rules are all about decrees and all of that. Now, because of the strikes, which I have already indicated, the SMC II, or the Supreme Military Council II, could not manage the situation well, and so the only thing that they could do was to declare a state of emergency and pass the emergency decree of 1978, which outlawed strikes and other forms of protest and declared damage to government properties as a criminal act, and also against the state. And so the government began to play down the effect of some of these things. Now, the most annoying thing was even that the government filled the vacant places. So those who went on strike, the government filled their positions with new civil servants, new recruits. And I'm just imagining if something like that is to happen in Ghana today, how it will be that people go on strikes and their positions are being filled by other people. Now, the decree also granted the government the right to also detain people without trial, or either to restrict them, of course, or anything. And this will not go down well with the people, because at this point in time, don't forget, the mood in the country at this point in time is to allow a civilian rule, and so doing all these things will not help. Now, the next of the reasons for that led, for which will be the last, and we'll bring our discussions to an end, was the constitutional provisions of an indemnity. The constitution that was being promulgated for the Third Republic, or that was to usher the Third Republic, brought in some provisions of indemnity, whereby you could not prosecute members of the SMC II, the SMC I, and even other military men, military leaders, for which had come to rule the country. A champions time, a lot of things had gone wrong. Not even a champion, but if you look at Ankara's and Co, all of that, the National Liberation Council, the National Redemption Council, the SMC I, all these were military regimes, and a lot of things had gone wrong. So, when they were allowing election to take place, they placed in a provision of indemnity, which then means that you could not prosecute any of them. And people felt that, it gave Ghanaians that indication that even Akuffo himself, we're all part of the corrupt practices. It dawned on Ghanaians that General Akuffo and other members of the SMC II had themselves been corrupt under the previous regime, and really, tension never abated as the people became convinced that the members of the NRC, the SMC I, as well as the SMC II, they wanted to go unpunished, after looting the national coffers. So it therefore came as no surprise when, on May 15, 1978, the junior officers of the Air Force, led by Flight Lieutenant General Rawlings, attempted a coup d'etat against the SMC II. And if you care to know, I also have a video where Fred Akuffo, Afifa, Major General Afifa, wrote a letter to a champion when a champion was in power, telling a champion that he has a feeling that they may be executed. And I think his feeling came true. They were executed, and he was part of those who were executed. Afifa was actually part of those who overthrew Sergeant Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and so that is it. But you see, the interesting thing is that when, Rawlings came to overthrow all these people, when he was also handing over power, when he was also returning the country to civilian rule from 1991, thereabout, he also put in that 92 constitution this indemnity, whereby you can't trial a president or a head of state after his office. You can't trial him until some number of years, which I think are like 20 or so. I stand to be corrected. And that's what is happening now. You can't take the president to court. You can't, try the president until 20 years. And we all know that our president, Akuffo right now, is almost 79 or getting to 80. So if you can't trial Akuffo for any offense that he has committed, imagine 20 years. We're waiting for the next 20 years. I don't know if yourself will be alive to try him. And some of these things are the reasons why, our presidents tends to do anything that they so, wish. South Africa, the US, Trump left office not more than 4 years ago, but Trump is in the court answering questions. Jacob Zuma, who was asked to resign in South Africa, is in prison as we are talking. I think that those countries, we are not better off than those countries. You understand? They are even the ones who actually borrowed us money. We go there to beg for money. But look at the systems that they have in place so that, it will curtail corrupt leaders. But look at the system that we have created for ourselves. And I don't blame any of these leaders, because they know that if they don't put in those clauses or provisions, they are going to be dealt with, or their hairs are going to grow. So that is that. So good. I think we've had a very nice discussion today. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, and like I have earlier indicated, if you have any question, you can also share. If you have any question or any topic for us to talk about, you can also bring it up in the comment section. Have a nice day, and